All right, Matt, if you want to press *6 to unmute your line.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, okay. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen, Deborah?
Yes.
Perfect, okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for joining. As Deborah mentioned, my name is Matt Lenhart. I'm a senior consultant here at the Ariba Best Practice Center. And today we're gonna walk through an introduction to the sourcing library. Sourcing library is a pretty useful tool really across any of your Ariba Collaborative sourcing products. That includes Ariba Sourcing, Ariba Contract Management, and Supplier Information and Performance Management. So it really can be used for all three of those, and we'll get into some of the details in terms of how you would do that. So I do have a brief slide presentation just to introduce everybody to the sourcing library, the audience for the call, you know, what interactions you might have with this tool. And then we'll get into the bulk of the presentation, which is a demo in an Ariba sandbox, just to give you a feel for what things look like and how you navigate through the different areas, and really how you use the information you're going to store in the sourcing library. So here's just our general agenda. We'll just talk briefly about the audience who would, and just the users who would be taking advantage of the sourcing library. So that includes administrative users and business users. So the access to the sourcing library is handled through the Team tab. We'll walk through that as well. But just be aware that this particular tool you have, your administrators do have the ability to hand out access to this. You can give different levels of access to the sourcing library. It doesn't necessarily have to be one group versus another. You can make it fairly open, and we'll talk about some ways that you can manage that. Then we'll have a brief overview of just what is the sourcing library, what is it used for, and then a special type of document we'll be talking a lot about today is the content document. So just some quick notes on that, and then we'll get into the demo, and then we'll come back to the slide presentation just for some best practices on using the sourcing library and just some tips and tricks on you know, making it work best for you. And I'll do my best here, you know, especially during the demo as we get to you know, kind of transferring from one topic to another. I'll try to pause, and if there's any questions we can answer quickly, we can take those. And of course, as Deborah mentioned, please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and certainly at the end of the presentation, we will review those. Okay, as I mentioned today, the audience is for Ariba administrators and Ariba business users. You see a few items here that might be related to each role. So administrators can control business user access to the sourcing library. So it is fairly open out of the box, which we'll talk about during the demo, but you can put some more controls on that. You can maybe open it up just to a small group if that's what you want to do, or handle access in a different way, which we'll talk about in our best practices. You can also maybe take on the task of managing folder and document structure. Depending on how open you make the sourcing library, it can get a little bit out of control. So you may be taking on the role of keeping that organized and making sure that people can find the things that they're looking for in there. On the business user side of things, this is really where you'll get into product-specific items. So things like creating standardized content for sourcing events. So if you are a company that uses sourcing events a lot, and you know, you find that people are constantly searching for you know, content that's been used before, searching for specific templates that you'd like to use for your line items or your lots. That might be something you want to use the sourcing library for. It's also used for storing frequently used documents. So if you're a business user that has a lot of documents that you're constantly handing out to people, you may be someone that's a good candidate for using the sourcing library. And then anyone involved in supplier performance management, there's a big topic that we'll get into today about the KPI library, which is part of the sourcing library. So you would be maintaining your master KPI list that you're using in that module. So you may not have all of these modules, but really it touches everything in the Ariba Collaborative Sourcing product set. So pretty much everyone here today will have at least some use that the sourcing library can accommodate. Okay, so I just talked a little bit about what the sourcing library is, but just in a general sense, it's really a document repository. It kind of follows the project or workspace structure that you may be familiar with in Ariba. And the business users can leverage it to maintain documents, typically frequently used documents and frequently used content for any of the Ariba Collaborative Sourcing solutions. So again, some examples I kind of already walked through a couple, but really for sourcing, we're talking about standardized or category-specific, potentially event content. And this can include line items and lots, and that's a really important topic here because in sourcing, in Ariba sourcing, when you're creating a template for a sourcing project or a sourcing event, you cannot build line items or lots into your template. The theory is that all of your events are so different that you really wouldn't store that type of information in there because it could vary from event to event. It might confuse your users. However, in the sourcing library, you can build that type of content. So if you have different line item structures, maybe different terms in your line items, and it's getting very tedious to rebuild those over and over again, or you're tired of searching for past events to copy from, the sourcing library can be a really great tool for you. You can split things up by category, split things up by region, whatever the case may be for your company. And then you can let people just copy those, content. It can be questions, prerequisites, or maybe attachments that people need to download as their suppliers are downloading as they're going through the event. And definitely your line items and lots, that's a really key bonus here for the sourcing library. So that's one of the primary uses here, hence the name sourcing library. But for contracts, if you have any kind of, frequently used documents that you would want to copy over into a contract workspace, or maybe, maybe templates or something that you're using as a starting point, and you want to just have those available for your users, you can use it for that purpose. Contracts probably is a little bit on the light side of use here for the sourcing library. The major functionality here isn't really geared necessarily towards contracts, but you certainly have potential uses for it, especially when it comes to storing some documents that you may use on a frequent basis. And then for SIPM, you really do have multiple uses here for supplier information and performance management. I already mentioned the big one, the KPI library. So really, we'll talk about it in the best practices, but all of your KPIs should be in the sourcing library to start. That creates master KPIs, and that's a big key to using that product to make sure that your reporting data is unified. But you can also use it similar to with sourcing. You can use it to create standard survey content that your users can copy. You can use it for supplier profile questionnaire questions. So obviously that, supplier profile questionnaire exists, and you can build questions directly in there. But if you want to build them up in advance and maybe, try out some different things before you put them into your SPQ for suppliers to see, you can use a sourcing library for that. It's also very key in transferring. If you are testing your supplier profile questionnaire, you can use the sourcing library to transfer your questions from a test site to the production site. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. That whole process is a little beyond this, the introduction here, but we will touch on it briefly. So in terms of getting to the sourcing library, it's very simple. You get to it from the Manage link that's on your dashboard. So when you log into the Ariba system, you probably notice up in the top right corner, you have a big blue Create button. Right next to that, you have a Manage link, which is highlighted in red here in the screenshot. And under that menu, you will find the sourcing library. Obviously, this menu you're seeing here varies by your role, but in general, you will see sourcing library there, and you can get to it directly from that link. And during the demo here, I'll also show you a couple other ways that you can get to that. And so one very specific item we'll talk about here today with the sourcing library is the content document. So this is a very special type of document that allows you to build the type of content you see in different areas in Ariba. So specifically, you see it in sourcing events, building questions, line items, lots. See it in surveys when you build questions, and you also see it in scorecards when you build key performance indicators or KPIs. You'll see those three items here, and you can build those in a content document, and then this allows you to copy pre-existing content from the sourcing library into whatever you're working on. So as I mentioned before, you're working on a sourcing event, you need to create a line item for a specific commodity or category. You can go directly in your sourcing library and maybe find the general line item structure that you're supposed to use. It has some terms pre-built for you. You don't have to build those all from scratch. You can copy them directly from the sourcing library. So this content document is really where you get that work done. So you can store this or stage this content here in the sourcing library in this type of document. You don't necessarily have to build a sourcing event or any kind of specific thing that's only for one product. You can just use this content document across the board for any of these areas of the system that follow this kind of interface. So we will walk through that in the demo here and kind of follow how this works. If you have touched any of those items, the supplier profile questionnaire, sourcing event, survey, scorecard, you will be familiar with this interface, but it's just important to note how this kind of gets all combined into one area where you can really build any of this type of content. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into a Sandbox Ariba site and walk through a demo here of the sourcing library and the different features that you have available. Okay, so I'm already logged in to an Ariba site right now. And I mentioned on the PowerPoint there that the easiest way to get to the sourcing library is right up here in the top right. You have a managed link here. You click to open that, and you have the sourcing library link right here, and you can jump right into it. There's a couple of other ways you can get to that as well. Under Common Actions, if you have this portlet on your dashboard, if it's something that you do frequently, you'll probably just see it right here, and you can click on it. But you'll see this Manage is also over here, and you can click into that same menu and get to the sourcing library. So the more frequently you use it, the more likely it will just be here for you to click immediately. But if not, you do have this more drop down where you can get to that area. It may also show up in recently viewed. Again, depending on how recently you've looked at it, we typically show around 5 items here. You again can get into them more and see a few other things here, but generally the top 5 things that you've seen most recently will show up in here. So you can see I've been to the sourcing library recently, so you can jump to it right from here. So you have a couple different ways to get there from your dashboard, but in general, right on your landing page when you log in, you can get to the sourcing library from there. So I'll go ahead and do it the traditional way here, right from the Manage menu. I'll go into the sourcing library. And this is what it brings up. And I mentioned before that it follows the same structure as our projects and workspaces. So if you're familiar with our full sourcing project or you've built a contract workspace before, this structure that you see here is going to be very familiar. So you probably won't use all of the tabs that are here like you would in a contract workspace or in a sourcing project, but they are here and it does function in a very similar way. Now, one thing I'll mention about the sourcing library is if it's not something you've used before or not something you've manipulated in any way, oftentimes you'll come in here out of the box the first time and it will look like this. It'll be a very stripped down, just the documents view of the sourcing library, which in most cases is just fine for your business users. No problem here. You have all your folders. You have your documents that you can get access to. You have your actions menu where you can create content. But the more administrative tasks, if you need to get to those, you will have to click this Show Detailed View. That's up here in the top right. It's kind of in this yellow box, just not to be confused with the other Show Detailed option that's here. But when you click on Show Detailed View, it will flip it to this more project-oriented structure that we see elsewhere in the system. So the Documents tab is going to be where you spend most of your time, especially for the business users. Again, this is where you'll create content. This is where you'll access content that's already here, make changes to it. And this functions, again, the same way as Documents tab as you'll find in other modules or in the specific modules in Ariba. Now, the unique thing here, though, is the Actions menu, which is up here on the right side of the screen. This will contain a lot of combined content. So you're going to see, so you see things here like assembled PDF, and you see content document and form, and you'll see, certain things here that are kind of generic across the different modules. So you're not going to see event here. You're not building a sourcing event directly in here. You're not going to see a scorecard in here. Those just aren't the types of documents that we're building right here. So generally, you're going to keep things a little more product agnostic, and that's really where we're coming from with this particular area. So that's where you'll spend a lot of your time there creating documents. We'll come back to this screen here to get into actually creating something and manipulating something. But I do also want to point out the Team tab here at the top of the screen. So we're going to jump over the tasks and go right to the team here. So what you're seeing right here, this is how the sourcing library comes out of the box. So you're going to see that we have 2 project groups. We have the project owner. This is assigned to the Ariba system user, and that's really just literally the Ariba system. So this is kind of like the default user account when it's not really one of your users that's taken action, it's just the Ariba system. This is the user that you see. So it's not really, this isn't really owned by anybody, but you can certainly add people here if you need to. If you're an administrator, you can change this team, and I'll show that in just a minute. And you also have the active observers here, so these are going to be people that can come in and access the material that's in here. And this is really where you get into, how do you want to control access to this? Do you want, so internal user, this is a system group, and this really contains just about every user that can log into your system. So if they have really any of the basic business user groups assigned to them, so this is the Ariba system groups, they will be part of internal user. They will be able to access the sourcing library. So if you are an administrator and you do want to change this, you would need to come up here to the actions menu, and you can edit the team members from here. If you're, obviously if you're having some issues with this, or you don't have the ability to edit this team, you can certainly contact your Best Practice Center representative, or you can contact Ariba customer support for assistance, but they can help you make changes to this if you'd like to. So we would just click on edit here from the actions menu, and then you can change the members of these groups to different system groups within your Ariba system, or to individual users. Generally, best practice, we recommend that you always use groups. Even if you need to go and create a custom group within the system, we would recommend that you go that route just to keep things simple. You don't have to come back here all the time and change this if you have people switching roles within your company or leaving or being hired. It's a lot easier if you just handle this at a administrative level and have a system group that you can change as necessary when you have personnel changes. So I just wanted to point out there, this is a team-based project, just like you have a sourcing projects, contract workspaces, SPM projects. So you can manipulate who is able to get access to this. It doesn't necessarily have to be every single user who logs into the system. And that can even go as far as, well, maybe their permissions are a little different. Maybe everybody can come in here and look at things, and maybe not everybody can create content or edit things. You can control it at that level too. So this is a topic for a different time as far as all the different roles and things that you can assign here, but just be aware that you can definitely have some control over how much this is used.
Hey, Matt, this is Deborah. I have a quick question from one of our guests today. Does the active observer group mean that group can purely access but not edit any document?
So that's actually controlled, that's a good question, and that's actually controlled by roles. So if we click on this group, you'll see they do have the role active team member, which should allow them to create things. So if you click into this role, they can create, edit and create documents, create tasks, create announcements. So they do have the ability to create content. So if you're seeing that your users don't have the ability to do that when they come in out of the box, if you have the same setup that we're looking at here, then that would certainly be something to talk with the Best Practice Center about, or talk to customer support and get some assistance there. But in our out-of-the-box setting, yes, they are active team members. They should have the ability to create content in the sourcing library. So it is a very open area, the way it is presented out of the box. So very open for creating content.
All right, that's the last question. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so there are some other tabs here. I'm not really going to spend significant time on them, but as an administrator, just be aware there is a history tab in here if you're curious. If anything has changed, or you're trying to figure out how a document was created or who did something, this is kind of an audit trail that's available to view. It's only available to a user who would be in this project owner group on the team tab. So just keep that in mind. If you are interested in seeing this history and seeing the audit trail, you would need to be in that project owner group. Okay, so we do have a message board in here as well. This is really for communicating with the project team. So again, anyone that's on that team tab, you can communicate with them here. Again, in the sourcing library, I'm not really sure that this would be heavily used, especially out of the box, since we would be talking about emailing really just about anybody who can log into Ariba. So not something I would necessarily expect that anybody would use here, but it is available if you do have a use case for it, or if this becomes a more collaborative area that people are using a lot. You may have a need to use that. We also have tasks in here too. Again, this is not really something we would necessarily expect or recommend that you would need to use here, but you can create tasks in the sourcing library. So if for some reason, you wanted somebody to review something that you created, or you wanted someone to do something in here, you could create a task just like you could in other projects within ARIPA. Again, though, in terms of best practice or any kind of recommendation we would make for using this, this isn't really something that we would be talking about. It's not really something we would see very commonly. Okay, with that, we'll go back to the Documents tab, because this is really where we'll spend the bulk of the time and where you'll probably spend the bulk of the time. And just in terms of basic navigation, what you're looking at here, this Documents list, this is really a drag and drop interface, so it's very simple to use. So we have some folders here that are pretty, kind of in place. They're a little scattered here because this is a sandbox environment, but this is generally how we would want to see your sourcing library laid out. Different folders for different content items or different categories or regions. We would want to see different folders here. And we have a couple of documents just listed here that are not in folders. So if you wanted to place one in a folder, you can literally just click it, and you can drag and drop it to another location within this list. So you can drag it, you'll kind of see it makes this little shadow of the item, and then it puts a blue line on the screen here to kind of indicate where something is going to go. So if I want to just move it within the list, I can drop it like that, and it will move it in line with the other folders. If I actually want to put it into a folder, I would click it, again, pick it up, and then I would actually hover over the folder itself, the little icon that's there. So you see the blue line goes away. It's not red or anything. So if it highlights in red, that means you can't drop it wherever you have your cursor right now. When you put it over a folder, that red line goes away, so you can drop it in there. The folder does highlight just a little bit. It might be difficult to see here, but it does highlight to a very slightly lighter blue to give you some indication that that's where you're dropping it. And then you just release, and it will move that document into this folder. So now it's in the folder here. And you can create folders within folders. You can really create a pretty complicated structure if you want to keep your items very organized. Now, in terms of creating a folder, it's pretty simple. You would just come over here to the Actions menu. So we'll come back to this shortly when we create a document, but I just wanted to show this interface for creating a folder. Okay, so I'm going to use the demo folder we have here already. This has just some basic content in it that'll make it easy to show some of the functionality here. So you'll notice to the left of these folders, I actually already clicked on this, but there is a little triangle that you can click. It just indicates whether the folder is expanded or collapsed. So clicking it will expand the folder, and then you can see the documents that are underneath it. You do have, on the far right here, you do have this grid icon. We call that the table options. And if you click on that, you can kind of show or hide some of the details about a folder or a document. So if you want to see who modified it, you can add that column. If you want to see when it was last modified, you can show that column. You can even show the document type, which actually is pretty useful here in the sourcing library because there are so many different document types. Not everything is necessarily just straightforward or for a single product. So sometimes it is helpful to see the content type, especially if you're not, or the document types, especially if you're not familiar with our icon system. Sometimes it might be a little bit difficult to know exactly what type of element you're looking at. So you can show or hide those columns through that table options menu, just to give you a little bit more information there in terms of how up-to-date a document is, or what type it is, or who owns it. So to create a document, you can do it in one of two ways. So one way would be to click this folder. So let's say you wanted to create it inside of a folder. You can click on the folder, and you'll get this full menu here. And it gives you a lot of different options here. So the top of it is going to be action on the folder itself. So these are going to be administrative options that you can take on that folder. So you can edit the name of it if you do edit attributes. So if you wanted to change something, you can click on edit attributes, and you can come back in and change the name of the folder. You can change the access control. You can change the properties there. The next level down are the tasks. So if you did want to use that task functionality, those are there for you. And then down here under upload and create, these are ways that you can create content inside of that folder. So the most basic way if you just want to load a document, so you don't necessarily want to create any content for a sourcing event or anything like that, you just want to load a document that you use a lot of the time. You just want to load that into Ariba. So that's actually the very first option here under this category. So it's upload document. So this just lets you load something that's on your desktop and put it into the Ariba system in the sourcing library. So I'll click on that, and that will take us to this screen here where we're asked to browse on our computer and find the document that we want to load into Ariba. I will click on browse, and I'm just going to load one of our pieces of documentation just for demo purposes. Again, when you start creating documents, you'll get a few more options here. We saw a couple of them when we created the folder, but you get some other options here. We have the base language of English. This will default to the base language of your Ariba site, and this is controlling what type of translations you can do. So you're going to be translating, in this case, from English to another language if you wanted to translate. In the case of this where we're just uploading a file, you may translate the name of the file if you wanted to. Publish keywords, this is a little bit beyond this particular webinar, but this lets you make what we call knowledge items that you can associate inside of your project. So if you use that functionality where basically you say, hey, this project is related to a specific keyword, any of the items you have with that keyword will show up in a little easy access panel on the left side of the screen for users. So again, not really in the scope here for this particular webinar, but if you're interested in that, we do have some documentation around it to explain what that does. But basically, it just is a quick access way for people to get into documents that are associated with a keyword. Okay, we're going to skip over the use as. It's not really relevant for this webinar. We have a couple of other options down here. We have announced the creation of this new document. So if somebody is watching the sourcing library, they use it as a watch project, this will send a notification to them to let them know that there's a new document available in the project. And then the following checkbox is unzip contents of this project. We're not loading a zip file, but if you were, you can check that box and it will actually unzip the file you're attaching, and it will put the documents directly into the sourcing library. So we're not going to use either of those options here. I'm just going to create the file. And you'll notice here that some of the other options like access control, they didn't appear here, and we're going to actually see those on an upcoming screen here. So I just browsed to my document, and I'll just click on create. So that will upload the document, and then we'll be taken to this screen here where we can kind of see the attributes of the document, and we can make further changes if we want to. So if I click on the actions menu on this screen, now I can edit the attributes directly from here, and I can make further changes. So if I don't like the name of the file that I uploaded, if that's not really what I want to call it, I can change that. So I'll just change the name of that there. And then down here, you get more into the more administrative type things in terms of how this document will function. So we do have version control on the document, so you can see a version history. You'll notice here when I make a change, I have the option of saving it as a new version or continuing the original version, so version 1 in this case. So I have that option there. So if you're not making a major change, like right here, I'm not really uploading a new version of this or changing anything that I might want to check on the version control later, I can just leave it as version 1. But if I were uploading a new copy of this, if there were some updates done to this particular file, I could save it as version 2, and then I could go back and see the history of that if I wanted to. Then down here we can set the owner, so the owner will default to whoever uploaded the file. And we also have editors here, so if you want to give access of this document, if you want to let other people replace it or make changes to it, you can list them here. Again, this can be, this can be a group of users or it can be a single user, just depending on how who needs to have the ability to get into this. So if you go into the search screen from here, from the editors, you'll be presented with this search menu. You can filter on type. So if you want to search for a group, you can sort it by that, so you can just see the groups. And then you can get down into users, you can get down into project groups. It'll give you really access to anything that's in the system, any users, any groups that you can access. You can pick one of them here. So you can really, notice that you can only pick one of them though. So if I wanted to add somebody, I have to click this select button. I don't get checkboxes where I can select multiple people. So if you were going to do a group, you would need to just have a little bit of planning there, or know that you already have a group available that includes the users that you're wanting to make editors here. But so this is a one selection, but you can select groups, so you can definitely make multiple people editors of a single document. Okay, and then down at the bottom here, we do have the access control again. So I will talk a little bit about this now because this would really apply to documents that you're loading. So we definitely have, more open access to the sourcing library, at least out of the box. It's very available to users who log in. But you may want to load documents in here or have content in here that you don't necessarily want anybody who can log in to see. And that's where access controls come into play. From this menu, similar to the one I was just using there for selecting a user, you can select from a predefined list of control profiles who gets to access this document. And by access, that means will they see it at all. So if you put access control on here and a user does not meet that access control, they will not be able to see this document. So if they come into the sourcing library, it will not be there. If they try to copy from another project, which we'll see in a moment, they will not see that document listed there. So this really gives you the ability to keep things open, but also have some control over some documents that you don't really necessarily want everybody to be downloading or using or sending out to somebody. So this is a predefined list of access controls. This is not something that you can create on your own. So you can't add to this list that you see here. So you really do kind of have to work in, work within the options that we give you here. So the most common ones, so we'll just kind of focus on the most common that we see. Number one would be private to team members. That's by far the most common access control. And basically that means anybody who's on the team of this project or workspace is able to see it. So this lets you do kind of team-based control. In this scenario, where in a sourcing library where we're keeping things pretty open to users, that one wouldn't necessarily have a whole lot of value here, because anybody who's on the team has access to the sourcing library and then would have access to the document itself. So I don't know that that one would be all that useful in the sourcing library, though it is very, very useful in your individual projects. So more often we would see classified, finance, and legal. These would be the access control profiles that we would see. So these are controlled by user membership to groups within the system. So there's a classified access group, a finance group, and a legal group that you can assign users to. And so they kind of fall under these profiles. So if they are in the classified access group at the system level, they're kind of falling into this classified access control that we see here. Same with finance and legal. So these are the three most common that we see. And generally, you just kind of have to work within these. It just depends on what type of document it is. But for the most part, classified seems to work fairly well if you're keeping this on a limited basis. So if you're just, it's either you can access these documents or you cannot. There's not really any, separation of, separate groups who can see various documents. Classified may work for you. But whatever you choose, again, you'll have to, the user will have to meet that access level to see the document. So if you click on View Details here, when you're creating it, this will give you a list of who can see that that particular document based on the access control. So you're going to see really it's just a couple of users here, really just our administrative users. So this is something you can work with to figure out who's got that ability, and you can make adjustments to make sure that the right people are seeing these documents. But this lets you keep things a little bit more secure than just having everyone throw a bunch of documents into the sourcing library without really having any kind of control over that. Okay, I think somebody might have a question. Deborah, is there a question about the access controls?
No questions at this time in the chat window. Remember, if you want to ask a question, you can unmute yourself by dialing *6.
Okay. Okay, so that puts my document in here in my folder. Oh, yep.
Yes, I'm Jean-Baptiste from France, and I have a question. I understand what you are doing. It is quite something as doing a model. I would like to know why it will be easier to use a sourcing library instead of the model library.
Instead of which library, sorry?
The model library. When you are going in manage,
you
have the possibility to see manage, and you have models. Template maybe? Yes, templates.
Mm-hmm.
In English, sorry, in French it's model.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah. Right, so we'll get, we're actually going to get into that here, kind of show why you would use this versus the templates. And it may be product specific. So, your templates in general, like for example, in contract management, your templates are really going to contain your starting point document. So your main agreement or your contract would be in your template, not in the sourcing library. But for things like sourcing, where in a template you can't create, for example, a line item structure. So if you have a standard way that you construct a line item for sourcing, you cannot put that in the templates area. You have to do it in the sourcing library if you want to do something like that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I will see the end of the presentation to see what's the difference.
Okay, sure. Yep, we'll get to that in just a moment here.
I'm sorry, do you have to press *6 again?
I think #6, I think, to remute. Is that right, Deborah?
Sorry,
or you can just put your phone on mute.
Sorry. You can put your phone on mute or #6.
Yeah, #6 or #6. We'll put it back on mute.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. All right, so that puts our document in the sourcing library in this folder. Just quickly, I can show you just another type of example of a document you can put in here as a URL, which some customers find useful. So you can select the URL here. You can put a link to another website. So just as an example here, I have the Ariba homepage. So if you open this, it actually opens an additional tab in your browser, or it might open an additional window depending on your settings. But you can take somebody directly to another website. So with this, we'll talk about it in the best practice section after the demo here, but this can be used if you have like work instructions, or you have even like recorded sessions that you've done at the Best Practice Center or another team within Ariba, and you want to make those available to your users. You can do that here. You can put a URL that points users to that type of information. Okay, so we're going to show you now where the power of the sourcing library comes in. So now we kind of showed you the administrative, kind of the functionality of the project in itself, but now we'll show you how this becomes useful to you. So once you have the content, the documents in here, this becomes useful to you when you start creating your own project. So just to start, I'm going to use this document that I just created and just show you how this comes into play. So if I go back to my dashboard, I've already set up a contract workspace just for demo purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And so now I'm in an individual workspace. So I'm in a project that I created. I'm working on a contract on my own with a team, and I say, hey, you know what, I need to get one of these documents that we're always using. It's not here in my template by default. It's not necessarily something that needs to be in every single contract we ever create, but you know, I need it for this one. I've decided I need it, and I'm going to go and grab that. So in this case, if you're going to do a document like an actual loaded file, like a PDF or a Microsoft Word file or something to that effect, from the Actions menu, you can do Create Document as opposed to Upload Document. That's a shortcut to upload the file from your desktop. So we'll do Create Document this time. And when you do that, it will bring up this interface where you kind of looks almost exactly the same as what we saw before we were uploading, but we have this option at the top here to copy document. So I'm going to click on that. And then this lets you bring up a search screen where you can start searching your site for specific documents. But because we did it in the sourcing library, we actually get a bonus or an easier way to get to this, and we can click on Explore. And this will bring up specialized areas within the system. So this is actually under knowledge areas within Ariba. And some, depending on where you're doing this from, some areas when you do this kind of copy, it will take you directly into the sourcing library. So we'll see that when we copy to an event, it takes you right into the sourcing library. In this case, you may be copying documents from like a PDF or some kind of an actual file from somewhere else. But you can get to sourcing library from the knowledge areas, and then sourcing library you can expand. And then you'll see your folder structure, what we've been looking at here through most of the demo. And you can expand that folder, and then it will let you select that to copy over. So I can just make a selection right there, and then I can click on Create, and it's going to pull that document right over into my contract workspace. So now that document's right here. I can then proceed to change some things, so it does put the copy of in there, but I can make some changes there or change who owns it, who can edit it. Same things we could do in the sourcing library, but I can just pull that document right over from the sourcing library. So again, this is a little bit more of a nice to have. You know, it's nice that you can do this. Some people might say, hey, it's just easier for me to upload the file. I mean, that's fine, but it is a good way to get in the habit of, hey, these are files we use frequently. Maybe they're not used in every single project, but we want them to be available so people can go look for them in Ariba. They don't have to come asking people. They don't have to go to a server or a server folder on our network. They can just come in here and find these things that we use in Ariba. So that's the way that you copy the document itself or a file. You do it that way. So now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to switch back into the sourcing library from my recently viewed this time. And then we'll take a look at this content document, which I've been talking a lot about, or I did at the beginning. So I'm going to go into our event content. So I have a couple of content documents preloaded here. So I'll open this up, and you'll see that the content document, it basically looks like, if you are familiar with the supplier profile questionnaire or a sourcing event, if you've built one before or you've played around with it, the interface is exactly the same. It has the same buttons at the bottom. You can add, you can edit, you can delete. All of that is very standard here, so it's familiar if you build this kind of content. What's a little bit different here is when you go to add, if you want to add content, you'll see things are unified here. So they cover a lot of different areas. So we have KPI from Supplier Performance Management. We have table section from sourcing. And then we have things like questions that are pretty universal. But then we have line item and lot, which are specific to sourcing. So you'll see all the different types of content listed here, as opposed to when you're in a sourcing event, you wouldn't see a KPI. If you're in a survey, you wouldn't see a KPI, you wouldn't see a line item. So this really lets you just go into whatever type of content you want. You don't have to create these as product specific. You can really just generate the content as needed. So in addition to that, the interface for the rest of this is very similar. If you build a section, this is exactly what you would see if you were creating a section in a sourcing event. So we're not going to get into all the specifics of creating this content. We have a separate session for that one, like building an RFP that gets into all these different options that you have. But the functionality is exactly the same here. So you really just come in and you build your content like you would if it were going into a sourcing event in this case. You would just build your content exactly that way. And you'll see here we even have some line items and some lots set up here as an example. So these are here ready to go, and this is really where, again, in this case, this is really where it really starts to become helpful to your company. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of here. And one thing I did want to mention, if you create a new content document from the Actions menu, so you would do it from here, just like you would when we created the document before, you do the same menu. But content document is way at the bottom. So here from the Actions menu, it's pretty simple to get to, but if you're creating it within a folder, just be aware sometimes it's so far down you actually have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to get to it. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes people might say, well, I don't see content document, but you do have to scroll down to get there. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a sourcing event that I set up ahead of time, and we will jump over into the content step. So this is just a basic quick project sourcing event. I'm not going to get into the rules. Again, we have separate webinars for that. But when you get to content, when you're on a page like this where you have content that you can build, one of the options you get, so again, this interface is similar to what we were just looking at in the content document. The difference here, of course, is we're not going to see something like KPI, which doesn't apply in sourcing. But what you get here is an option at the very, very bottom, which is content from library. It's a little more specific than when you're copying a file, but when you click on that, it'll bring up a similar interface to what we looked at before, but it will take you directly into the sourcing library. So it's going to jump you right into here, and then we can open up the folder that we were looking at. So when you're looking in this, obviously we're not going to be able to copy things like the file that we used before or a URL. Those things don't really apply here. But I can select any of my content documents that I have. So I'm going to select my event content that we were just looking at. I'll click on select, and then it will bring up all the content that I have in here. And I can go through and I can check the items that I want to copy over. So if I just want to do, for example, if I just want, hey, just these questions or this boilerplate, you know, introductory material, I just want to copy that over, I can just select those items. If I also want to pull over the lots and the line items, I can select those as well. And I can even get down to, I only want, you know, I just want to copy this question over. I don't even want the section, I just want to copy this one specific question that I need or this one specific text item that I need. I just want to pull that over. So this can be useful sometimes. For example, this one we're asking for a non-disclosure agreement. Maybe you don't have that attachment on file, so you can just copy that one single item into your event just to get that document that you need. So you can do that. You can check. So it's easier to check the sections if you're really just copying the content in bulk. And you will have an option here at the top for visibility conditions. If you do that on your content, if you have content that appears under certain conditions only, you can copy those with the content as well. You can also choose to not copy them. Most of the time, you probably would if they have a specific need to only appear to a supplier in certain situations. You would copy that, but you can uncheck that if you say, you know what, in this event, they need to see all of this. It doesn't matter how they answer. Then you can certainly uncheck that. But just for anybody that's concerned, you know, if you're building a lot of these visibility conditions, they take, you know, a significant amount of your time to set up. You can't copy those over, so you don't need to worry that you'll lose any of that work that you did. Okay, so I'll just click on copy here. That will pull over the information that I checked. So I'll just see those items. I can get rid of, you know, anything that was in there by default if I want to, just to clean things up. So there's your content there. And so this really starts to, you know, pay dividends for you when you don't have to, you know, go searching for other events that this content was used in. You don't have to try to remember the sourcing event number or, you know, try to find out exactly where it was or when it was created or anything like that. You can just say, hey, in our sourcing library, we have the latest version of this content. I'm going to go directly in there and get it. So the other content you can copy, of course, if I go into the same area as the line items, I'm going to test this here. One thing you have to be a little bit aware of just when you're creating line items or lot is just that there are different rules that apply. So not every type of content is going to work with every type of event. So if you have an event that doesn't use a total cost or some kind of a roll-up mechanism for calculating a supplier's price, and then you try to copy content that does use that, you're going to get an error. So for example, if you had a formula in your line item that calculates a value, if you try to pull that into an event that uses a template that doesn't allow formulas, you will get an error. So if I click on copy here, we'll see it should copy over, but there you go. There's the type of error messages you would receive. So I can't select these items because of template rules. So it's just something to keep in mind. This will kind of keep you restricted on that. It'll make sure that people aren't going to copy line items or lots into their event because, that don't really work with the type of event you're running. So if you really don't want people using formulas, it's not going to let them go in and then try to pull in something that's using the formula. So it does have some checks on there, so we'll make sure your users are kind of following your procedures. I'll try to pull one in here. So that one will pull in. So this time I did a line item, and that was fine. My other item in there was a lot, and this particular template does not allow for lots, so it didn't let me copy that over. So it does, it does keep your users in check there, so they're not just going crazy with pulling all their content in. But so this saves a lot of time here. If you do shipping costs and you do a discount percentage in all of your events for region or commodity, this lets you copy that over very quickly. Your users don't have to create that from scratch. And again, sourcing event templates, you cannot create line item or lot templates. The only way you can do this is through the sourcing library. So this is really where it starts to pay off for you in the sourcing module. Okay, and just really quickly, I will show you just kind of how this follows the same pattern. So if you're somebody that manages the supplier profile questionnaire, which is under Manage Supplier Knowledge, so these are the questions that go out to your suppliers. If you're somebody that is responsible for managing that, the same rule applies here. You can copy content from library. It takes you into the sourcing library. I had an example set up here for SPQ content. It works exactly the same way. So I can select the content that I'm interested in, I can copy visibility conditions, and I can pull that right into my SPQ. And this really comes into play because if you do testing in your test realm, which you should for your SPQ, if you test out your items before they go into production, there is not an import for your production site in the supplier profile questionnaire. So what you can do, though, is you can import to the sourcing library and then copy into your supplier profile questionnaire. So again, that's kind of a topic out of the scope here, but just that's a reason why you might use the sourcing library for the SPQ. Okay, and then I'm going to show one more item here in the sourcing library. Let me go back. Okay, one other thing I just want to show quickly, and I'll actually kind of combine this with talking about the KPI library, but in your content documents, you do have the ability to switch your display to scoring. So if you use scoring in your sourcing events or in the SPQ, or in this case, certainly for a scorecard in supplier performance management, you can set that up here in advance so that when somebody copies the content from the sourcing library, the scoring is already set up as well. So if you want to standardize scoring for your company so that when you're using these items, you're following this scoring mechanism, you can set that up here in the sourcing library. Again, it just saves your users a lot of time because some of these scoring, depending on how you set it up, if you do pre-grading, where you're automatically assigning grades to responses that suppliers make, that's a lot of work to set up. So if you can set that up in the sourcing library in advance, and you can make it easier for your users who don't necessarily know how to do that, it really helps them out a lot. It makes their lives a lot easier in terms of building their event content or whatever they're building. Okay, so that's controlled here in this display drop-down, content versus sourcing or scoring. Okay, so the last topic here is really just for key performance indicators. So this applies to the supplier performance management module. It's very, very critical that when you create your KPIs, your key performance indicators, they have to go in well, they don't have to, but technically, but we strongly, strongly recommend as a best practice, your KPIs should be created in the KPI library first. And the KPI library isn't a separate area of Ariba. It's actually something you just build into the sourcing library. So it's a content document in the sourcing library that contains KPIs. So we always want you to create them here first and then copy them into your template for supplier performance management. And the reason we want you to do that is because KPIs are a little bit different, or a different type of content because you're collecting data, scoring and performance data under those, and you want them to roll up to the same area. You don't want them to be, you don't want people creating, one KPI in one project and naming it something slightly different in another project and something slightly different in another project, and then when you do your reporting, you have 3 different KPIs that are all measuring the same thing. You don't want to end up in that situation. So you want to use a sourcing library to build your KPIs first, which you can do here again from this add menu. You have KPI right here at the top. So you build your KPIs in here first, you set up your scoring, and then you will copy these over into your scorecard in your SPM template. So I have some KPIs sitting here right now. They're in here in my KPI library. So I'm going to go into my Supplier Performance Management project and just show you again how those are copied over. So this will follow the exact same procedure as we had done, except we're going to go to under Manage Templates here. So this will really be for your administrators for SIPM. You would be doing this activity. So under the templates, I have an SPM template that we can use. We can just open that up. And in this case, for KPIs, these apply to scorecards. So you wouldn't be able to copy it into a sourcing event. These would only be applicable within a scorecard. Okay, so we have a scorecard set up. And we'll go into this one actually. Not sure what happened there, but if we go into the scorecard, again, we'll have the content from library. So under the add menu, we get content from library. And again, we'll be taken into the sourcing library here. And under our demo folder, we have our KPI library sitting here. And you'll have the options available here to select from, so you can pull your KPIs in. Now, what's interesting here is if I say, for example, I want to pull this KPI in, just this one, you'll really kind of notice how this works when you go into this KPI. If you take a look at it, it's actually going to call out that your master KPI is located in your sourcing library. So under Knowledge Areas, under Sourcing Library, you have this folder and you have this content document. That's where this KPI originates. So when you collect data for your KPIs, they're all going to roll up to the same location. So when you do your reporting, they're all going to go to the same place. So your reporting is very unified. You can compare suppliers equally against each other using the exact same KPIs. So that's very critical. So for supplier performance management, if you do have that module, this is a very critical item. You have to, you really want to do this. And one thing I'll just point out very quickly is if you do try to create a KPI in a scorecard by itself, the system is going to direct you to the sourcing library. So there will be a warning here telling you should go to the sourcing library. You should pick one from there. We recommend you don't create a KPI directly in a scorecard. So we'll kind of guide your users that way as well. So if you're concerned they may not follow this, we do try to guide them there. Okay, so that pretty much covers the functionality of the sourcing library. I know there was a lot that was covered there. I hope kind of the major theme is you're building content in there that is copied into other areas of the system. So if I come back just quickly to our slide deck, just a couple of items here for best practice. You know, I mentioned at the top here when we look at the Documents tab, the properly formatted sourcing library, it's going to have folders that organize your content. Just makes things easier for everybody. So administrators can help out there and just making sure that everything's got its own folder. In some cases, even for sourcing, for example, you may have folders specific to a commodity business unit, you know, ways to separate that content out so people can find it easily. We talked about access controls. That's a great way to limit availability of documents within the sourcing library without necessarily having to close it down to specific groups. So people can still use it, but you can control who sees certain documents. We already talked about this just a minute ago about the key performance indicators. You definitely want to create those in the sourcing library as a best practice, and you will, you know, have all your data roll up that way. And then since the sourcing library really is open to everybody, you can consider using that as a place to store training materials, recordings, work instructions, things like that. You can consider using it for that purpose. Okay, so just some of our upcoming sessions here. Do we have any questions, Deborah?
No questions.
While we leave these on the screen? No questions, okay. Well,
you know, if you have any questions, *6 to ask those questions. And then if you'd like a copy of this slide deck, please send me your email address in the chat window, and we'll make sure we get that out to you.
Yeah, Sharon?
Yeah, this
Hello.
is Deborah. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I mean, I have in the screen I'm seeing now that there is a sessions on December month also. So we'll be getting the invitation for that also.
Yes, I believe the invitations have already gone out for December. If you haven't gotten it, just send me your email address, and I'll make sure to get you the list with the registration link.
Yeah, it's a small K. Hello.
Okay. Yep.
It's a small K. MANOJ.
Okay.
Number 2.
Okay.
@csc.com.
Okay. And if you'd also type that into the chat window, that would be helpful as well. I see a couple of those are coming in for the slide deck, so we'll make sure that you get the deck.
Okay, I'll type that, and that's for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am. And the session was very nice, actually. He has, moved all the parts of, contents and all key things which we'll be using from the sourcing library for all the 3 modules, and it's very awesome.
Good. Thank you. Great testimonies for that. Matt, you want to add anything else?
Within 1 hour, it's really nice, actually.
Great. Good to hear. Okay, so I'll just mention that, if you're subscribed to the Ariba Best Practice Center, you get access to myself, to other members of my team. We give strategic advice. We give guidance on topics, including the sourcing library, if that's something you'd like to talk about. If you'd like more information, please contact your customer engagement executive, and they can help get you in touch with the BPC.
Okay. And I'm sending my mail ID to Sharon Houghton, host, in chat.
Okay. Great.
Yep. That's perfect.
I got it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Deborah,
have a great day.
Quick question.
Sure.
Yes.
Bye.
I noticed that the session was recorded. Would you send out a link, or do we have to request that?
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, last time also I requested to send the recording link, actually.
If you want the recording link, that's going to come out a little bit later.
Okay.
If you send me your email address and tell me that you want the recording, we'll make sure to put you on the list for that and let you know when it's available. Okay. We do have a repository, and I'll make sure that Matt has that if he's going to send these out. You have access to a repository, so there's a link for that, but it takes a little bit for us to process them. So it'll be that same link, and you can just use it later.
Yeah, that's okay, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matt, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.